Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I feel like I have to explain myself a little bit for this one. As some of you know, I consult for companies from time to time. I help steer them in tech directions, usually when what they call is transformation. When they have an existing business, they need to modernize. Transformation's it's a nicer word than modernize. I don't think any company wants to be referred to as we're tech old. So the word modernize implies that they're running around like the Flintstones. There somewhere in the back, there's like a dinosaur that's licking stamps, or who knows what. I don't know why that's the image that came into my head. But anyway, I do tech transformation, and generally speaking, it's a good time to do that. There's a lot of good work out there. A lot of companies need people, and a lot of companies deferred making changes. In many cases, I think mobile in particular, it paralyzed a lot of people. Meaning they saw the phones, are like, oh, I don't know what to do about this phone. It seems like this is important, but not really sure of what we should do with this. Should we make a mobile app? How do we make a mobile app? Seems expensive to make a mobile app. Maybe let's just wait. And so a lot of people did wait, and now here we are, and it's come to the point where you really can't wait anymore. And the pandemic accelerated this because now it's suddenly like, hey, maybe touch-free technology is a pretty important thing. And I hold a handful of patents with touch-free technologies and Bluetooth and other things, which has been helpful. But one of the things that's inherent, and I mention all this because several of you who listen to this would like to work in comics. I get a lot of people that send me things either as writers or as artists. And one of the places I'm just going to give this blanket advice out to everyone is regardless of what you think about your skills, whether you think you're a techie or not, or even if it's boring or not. I've got to get more to that in a second. The tech industry has jobs for you. If you're a writer, there's the idea of documentation. Documentation sounds boring and old, but it's actually not. Or doesn't have to be. In fact, the jobs that are going to pay more are ones where you do not write old, where you write, you write what's called user-friendly documentation or user experience documentation. It means you write like a real person rather than say, insert flap A into document B, push command C 5 times. I mean, instead of saying something like that, you might say, hey, you want to print a file, like a picture or an image. Well, here's how you do it. Write like a human being, basically. That's very much in demand. If you're an artist, there's a ton of needs for UX. UX may be a design for an app. It may be some illustrations that are going to go into the app or into the computer program that you're doing, into the software. It may be a visual explanations of what's going on, and just kind of like a comic book. The crazy part is, and this is where I feel like I owe some people an explanation, is I was recently doing a job where I need to hire someone to write and draw some documentation to basically, and the way the pitch for this documentation is it needs to be friendly. And in fact, the person coming to me is like, you know comics, you do some stuff in comics. I'm looking for something that's like a comic book that's going to help explain this software. Software is for medical, so it's going to explain how to use the equipment, and we want visuals there, and we want it to look friendly. And then every now and then we're going to put in like a photograph or a schematic. And so we want to break that up with, like pictures of like patients talking to doctors and that kind of stuff. It's kind of like a comic book, but it's a little visual manual, UX manual. And they're like, who can we hire? You must know some people, right? And I'm like, yeah, I know tons of people. And immediately I start thinking of a bunch of people I know in comics. I'm like, yeah, I could do this. And then I get this interesting fantasy about like, I should talk to Ben Templesmith and get him to draw this. And I think that would be hilarious because it's like, this for this fairly well-known, very corporate pharmaceutical company. And it's like, I'm trying to picture like his art style in this. And then Stefan Sajak, who comes to some of the live streams, I'm sure I'm butchering your name. I apologize, man. I think like I should do that. And then like I'm now picturing like the doctors talking to the patient, and then the two just start making out. That's not all he does. But anyway, I would go through this little fun fantasy of like the art I'd like to see. That'd be kind of hilarious. But anyway, I like, yeah, I know some people. I'm like, how much does it pay? It's like, well, it's going to pay probably about $8,000 to the writer, and probably about 8 to 12 to the artist. And then ideally, we want the artist to do the graphic layout. So the basic, unlike comics, the writer is going to put some material together, going to send it to the artist. The artist is going to take the text and composite it with the image that gets done, send it back to the writer for some edits, and then out it goes. That's how it's going to work. And I'm like, okay. My list has gotten shorter with that explanation. It's like, all right, I'm going to need somebody who's willing to kind of do these different pieces and everything else. And then it's like, when do you need it by? It's like, well, here's the thing. We need it in 10 days, basically under 2 weeks. And, we really don't have time for a second draft. So they've got to like nail it on the first draft. I'm like, oh, okay. Now that list has shrunk considerably. And then I find a couple people and I bring them back. Like, here's some people who might be able to do this that kind of fit what you're looking for, have a kind of corporate style that will still look fun and kind of airy. And the person that I'm working with is like, no, this looks great, but bad news. You know how we said we had 10 days? We've actually got 2 days, 48-hour turnaround. But because it's 48-hour turnaround, we could probably put another $5,000-$10,000 in the mix for the two people. And now I basically at this point have scrapped. I make a call to one of the people I know in comics. So I'm like, hey, would you like to do this? The money is great, by the way. The money I've just described is more than what a lot of people make in the comics. And but the answer I get back is no. I'm going to need at least a month because I'm working on this other thing, and I probably a month to 2 months. I'm like, no, we actually need this in 48 hours. Do you think you can bump some stuff? It's like, no, I'm doing this other thing that I committed to with, I won't mention the publisher, but I'm doing this other thing and I kind of need that. And I get it, right? But ultimately, where we landed is I found this, I have a relationship with some of the art schools in the area. And I basically called up friends I have at the UW, University of Washington, and found some people who could come and do it. And basically found one person. I was like, well, does it have to be two separate people? Because that's somebody with, kind of an English degree, but also somebody who can draw, light kind of airy style, has done a couple things on Webtoon, but really isn't a comic artist, is really, they're going to pursue a English degree. Cool. And so I reached out to this person, got stuff back in about 8 hours, looked pretty good. I went back and forth before he submitted it on, just overnight, and great. And handed the person a check for $24,000. What's the moral to this story? First off, you should take this as good news. If you want to get into comics, comics, as you've heard, doesn't always pay well, isn't always consistent. And so if you can market and position yourself slightly differently, do some tech writing. Again, tech writing is not technical in most cases. Do some illustration work that can be used to kind of, highlight and define how, how some of this stuff gets done. And you can pick up quite a bit of work, probably work that makes you more money than you would make in comics. The frustrating part for me is that I would love to have given some comic people some work, but it became too much of a headache to do that. And when you're working in the tech industry, if you're working in medical and other things, the turnarounds, like I mentioned, a 48-hour turnaround. Because later down the road, I was mentioning this. I'm like, oh, so they wanted this in 48 hours, and I got this weird response of, well, you're not going to get anything good at that turnaround. But I did. Customer was happy. Not only that, this woman who did the work is a student. And basically, the sequel to the little story I just mentioned is that the company's like, hey, do you think she'd work for us and do other things? And I'm like, I'm sure she would. She wasn't pursuing that degree, but they're like, I know they're currently negotiating a rate, but I think they're looking to pay her somewhere in around about $95,000 a year, right out of college, or probably before she's finished college, to do some of this lightweight work. I'll tell you, it is hard to make that kind of money in comics. It is very hard. Breaking six figures is extremely difficult. And to do it, you've got to be at the top. So you might say to yourself, well, why would anyone want to work in comics? Well, maybe you love comics. That's a good reason. Maybe you love doing it. Um, but that doesn't mean, one, you have to exclusively work in comics. In fact, you should not. You should absolutely pick up some of this other work. The benefit to picking up some of this other work is that it might also teach you some discipline, particularly if you're new to comics. I Sometimes people get right into comics having done nothing. I mean that. You know what I mean? What I said. Having done nothing, you've worked at a a UPS store, or you just did some kind of you're an administrative assistant intern at Amazon for one of the subsidiary groups. I mean, cool. You haven't done anything that really is going to teach you discipline. Doing some projects like this helps when you actually have a deadline that's pretty aggressive, when you actually have to figure out how to gather requirements so you can, communicate it and turn it around in a reasonable way. These are all pretty important skills to learn. Um, it's it's frustrating when I see people go immediately into comics and they clearly haven't picked up some of those skills, and then they proceed to be difficult right out the gate. And in some cases, they're friends of editors, so their employment within comics is unnaturally extended. But you know where that story is going to go. It's going to go to GoFundMe's. It's going to go to nothing. It's going to go to nonsense work. It's going to go to basically being out of the industry before you hit 30, or maybe you started in the industry late. And I mean, it's just there's too many careers in comics that are like 6-year max arcs. That's as far as they go. And the reason why they're so short is because the person getting in doesn't really know what they're doing. Nobody is standing there telling them, like, here's how you become a grown-up. Here's how you treat your this work and this business seriously. And there's also this massive misunderstanding about what things are worth. Um, anyway, it's a curious. I'm hoping this video has kind of two purposes. One, goddamn, if you're in the industry, please look into some of this stuff. I'm begging you, please, for your own sanity, because I don't want to see you show up on a GoFundMe or needing to beg people for money. I don't want to see you there. And the problem is, if you defer what I'm talking about right now, if you decide like, I'm going to pursue comics for a few years and then I'll look into this stuff. All that's going to do is it's going to put a bunch of people who are, 18, 19, 20, 21, and they're going to get in line ahead of you. And you're going to get a bunch of these people who get staff jobs doing this kind of work. Right now in the Pacific Northwest, anyway, if you're coming out of school with any kind of design degree, including an associate's, a 2-year degree, and right now with this increasing labor shortage, it looks like we're heading into getting closer and closer to Thanksgiving and to winter. You can pick up jobs with no degree if you have a decent portfolio, and a decent portfolio just means work that looks more or less competent, polished, and professional. It's less about actually what you put on the page and more about kind of how it's laid out. If you're a writer, a resume or a LinkedIn profile that isn't filled with typos and crazy shit. Right now in the Pacific Northwest, you can start between 85 and 110 right out of college. Amazon was doing this bit where they were basically offering to pay people's college as an added benefit. Like, you come out and then we'll give you 90 grand as a starting position doing graphic design work for our products, which is I mean, look, that work is so entry level. It's low bar. You can do it. You have a basic understanding of Photoshop or PowerPoint or freehand, or freehand's actually showing my age quite a bit. Illustrator, freehand. Jesus Christ, that came out of nowhere. And Quark Express is also super useful. Who wants to do stuff in PageMaker? All right. Anyway, you can get these jobs, and you should. That's probably one of the best ways to start your comic career, is by getting one of those jobs. It provides you stability. It provides you with some understanding of how to meet a deadline and get things done. And by doing that, you will gain skills. You will become more popular, more powerful, more capable in your career, and you'll get a lot more work. That's what the future can look like. You should go do that. And yes, of course, still work in comics. I'm not telling you go get one of these jobs instead of comics. I'm telling you get one of these jobs because it will help make your comic work more successful. By the way, getting one of these jobs, there's not going to be a non-compete. You can still do comics. You will still have time. Anyway, it's a weird thing. The sad part that struck me is like I really wanted to give the work to some comic people, and I found myself struggling to do that. We'll see how it goes in the future. Anyway, just something for you. Thanks for listening.